In this presentation, we will be looking at descriptive statistics, specifically the measures of central tendency. The three measures of central tendency you need to learn about are the mean, the mode, and the median. To be able to work on this topic, you may need to define these terms: quantitative data, qualitative data, outliers, and skewed data. Where you see this symbol, feel free to pause the presentation so you can define the terms, complete the tasks, or answer the questions. The answers will follow on the next slide, so feel free to pause this presentation now to define the terms. So the key terms: quantitative data is numerical data, qualitative data is detailed data, and this is often in a written form. The outliers are an extreme score, and this can be high, low, or you can even have both a high and low extreme score. And skewed data is data which is changed by an extreme score. So the three measures of central tendency are the mean, mode, and median. And these are all looking at where the central point of your data is, hence the name, the measures of central tendency. The mean is sometimes known as the average. It uses all data in the dataset. It is calculated by adding together all values and then dividing them by the number of pieces of data in the dataset. The mode is the most common value in the dataset. You put the values in the dataset in order and find a value which occurs most often. The median is the middle value in the dataset, and you calculate this again by putting the dataset into numerical order and finding the number in the middle. If the dataset has an even number of values, the two values in the middle are added together and then divided by 2. So a quick test of knowledge. Can you calculate the mean, the mode, and the median for this dataset? And again, feel free to pause the presentation to work out the answers before you see the answers on the following slide. So quick test answers. The mean you calculate by adding all of the values together, and because there are 10 values in this dataset, you divide that total by 10, which equals 18.9. The mode is 18. It's the only value with two scores which are the same. And the median is 18.5. Because this dataset has an even number of values, the fifth value is 18 and the sixth is 19. So you add together 18 and 19, divide it by 2, which equals 18.5. Remember, if there's an odd number of values in the dataset, then you just select the middle value. Evaluating the measures of central tendency. Now, when you evaluate the measures of central tendency, it also helps you think about which measure of central tendency you might use for a specific dataset. So, the mean. It is the most sensitive and representative of the dataset because it incorporates all of the data in it. However, this can cause a problem because if it includes all data, it can be skewed by extreme scores. The mode, unlike the mean, is not skewed by extreme scores because it doesn't consider all of the data in the dataset. However, some datasets don't have a mode, a most common value, or they have more than one. For these datasets, the mode is not a good measure of central tendency. Also, the mode, because it doesn't consider all values in the dataset, may not really represent the central point of the dataset, and this is something you'll have to look at when you look at a specific dataset. The median is also not skewed by extreme scores because it doesn't incorporate all data in the dataset, it just looks for the midpoint of the dataset. But because it only considers the middle values, it may not always represent the dataset because those middle values may not actually be at the central point of the data. So another quick test of knowledge. I would like you to work out which measure of central tendency you would use for each of these datasets, dataset 1, 2 and 3, and then I'd like you to justify why. And this can be justifying why you use one and why another one would not be suitable. You can pause the presentation now to answer this question. So the answers to the quick test of knowledge. Dataset 1. The mean would be suitable because there are no extreme scores and it is the most sensitive measure of central tendency. The mode in this case would not be suitable as there are two modes, and you could use the median. For dataset 2, the mode would be suitable as 12 is the most common value. The mean is not suitable as there is an extreme score. The median could be used. For dataset 3, the mean would be suitable as the dataset does not have an extreme score. The median would also be suitable as the middle value of 4.5 does represent the midpoint of the dataset. However, the mode of 1 is not a suitable measure as it does not represent the central point of the dataset. So there are some easy errors or things you need to look out for when answering questions on the measures of central tendency. The first is when calculating the mean, and if you are using decimal points, then you go to 2 decimal places. If you are looking at number of people or something that is a whole value, then you need to be careful. You may want to round up or down. The second issue can be it's easy to mix up the measures of central tendency, which are the mean, mode and median, and the measures of dispersion, which are the range and standard deviation. So make sure you're very clear about which ones are looking at the central point of the data and which ones are looking at the spread or dispersion of your data, so you don't mix up the two descriptive statistics. So applying to the world of psychology. A psychologist carried out research into memory recall techniques. Participants were either in the image condition, they saw pictures, or the text condition, they saw words. His results are below. What you need to do now is identify which measure of central tendency you would use for each data set, and then justify your decision. That means you need to explain why you've chosen you need to explain why you have chosen the measure you have, and why you haven't chosen the other measures of central tendency. You can pause the presentation now to complete this task. So, applying to the world of psychology, the answers. For the image recall task, the median would be the most suitable measure of central tendency, and this is 14.5, because it does represent the central point of the data set. The mean would not be suitable as there is one extremely low score, which would skew the value, and there are 4 mode values in this dataset, and therefore it is not a good measure of central tendency in this case. For the text recall, the mean is the most suitable measure of central tendency as it represents the central point of this dataset and it includes all values. There is also no extreme score to skew the mean. The mode of 6 is not really a suitable measure of central tendency because it doesn't represent the central point of the dataset. If you look at the spread of the data, there are some higher values which would skew should in theory give you a central tendency score above 6. The median of 7.5 is not the most suitable measure of central tendency as this also doesn't represent the central point of this dataset. Again, because there are lots of scores which are higher. This ends the session Descriptive Statistics, Measures of Central Tendency.